Welcome to the Heartland Running Podcast. Join Crystal, Andy, and Chandler as they explore all things running related in the Heartland and beyond.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Heartland Running Podcast. I'm Crystal.
I'm Andy.
And Chandler's actually out on vacation tonight.
Where is Chandler at anyway?
You know what? While I am sitting here in freezing Ohio, I don't know what it's like in Missouri, but he's in Florida.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. Well, darn him.
As you can hear, Andy's sitting here with a cold too. So I hope he's having a good time. He's out having Christmas with family. So because we're recording this just shortly before Christmas.
Oh, good for him.
So around here, one of our mottos is that we like to geek out on all things running related. And I think tonight's show, we're going to have a good chance to geek out on a lot of behind the scenes stuff. Our guest is likely somebody that most people have not heard of, but have heard of his work. So it's kind of cool. So our guest tonight is Brandon Wilson. And a little bit about Brandon. Brandon served in the Marine Corps. He is a USATF official, a Grand Poobah course certifier. Pretty sure that's the proper term. One of the premier race timers in the country, and has also created some of the craziest and coolest races. So welcome, Brandon.
You've been talking to Steve Durbin.
So some of this may have come from Steve.
Yeah, I think
so. Now, we said that you're the Grand Poobah course certifier. That's really not the proper term. What is the proper term for the level that you have achieved?
Well, I'm a USATF course certifier.
Okay.
I'm also certified to measure internationally as an IAAFA measurer as well.
Oh, that's cool.
So basically that means I can measure anything in any state, in any country, in a nutshell.
Okay, wait. So what's the coolest place you've been?
I haven't measured internationally, but I've measured up and down the East Coast. Well, yeah, I'm pretty newly appointed A measurer, so the opportunities to measure internationally haven't happened a lot, but maybe they will soon.
Oh, well, we hope you get to go somewhere cool. So how do you get into something like that?
Well, I didn't want to pay someone else to do it.
I love that.
That sounds crazy, but I was putting on races and was looking into course certification and was like, man, I don't really want to pay anyone to do that. And I opened the manual. It was really long. It was that time, I think, 64 pages. And I was pretty overwhelmed with it. So I called someone I knew that was doing it and asked him if he'd show me and teach me how, and kind of took it from there.
I mean, we go to all these races and, we look for ones that are certified and all this stuff. But what kind of, if you can give us like the idiot's version, how do you actually go about certifying a course? Yeah,
well, there's a counter that you put on your bike called a Jones counter. And you actually calibrate that on a known distance course that's been previously certified. And that's done by pulling a steel tape and, adjusting for temperature. Typical course is 1,000 feet. So you ride your bike, over that calibration course 4 times in order to get the average number of counts in 1,000 feet. And then you have a calibrated counter. And so you ride the course and you get the number of counts on the course. And you go back and calibrate your counter to make sure that your constant that you got before you measure is the same. And then you divide the number of counts for the course by the number of counts in a mile or kilometer, and you have the certified distance. And you just got to drop a map and do a 7-page application to a certifier saying, this is all the information. Here's everything that I measured, everything where all the turnarounds are, how I measured. It's a pretty detailed process to document that, and it's reviewed by a certifier, and once they agree that it's correct, they issue a certificate.
So now, as someone who runs a course, any runner is going to run the tangents. They're going to try to, get as close to the inside of the road as they possibly can, or trail, or
Absolutely.
however it is, so they can,
and
shorten the course.
That's exactly how we measure it too. Yeah,
Okay,
they're not going to be able to get it any shorter than we measure it.
Okay, so it's not down the middle of the road. It is the absolute shortest route that you can possibly take through that course.
Yes, it is. It is the shortest distance that the runner can run. That is what is certified.
I'm really curious. You said one of the things that you had to factor in was temperature. How does
Absolutely.
Yeah, how does temperature affect it? I love that this is like the idiot's version, and I don't understand half the stuff, so I'm not sure what that says about me.
The temperature affects the air pressure in the tire, which actually expands and contracts the tire. So as the temperature is going up and the wheel expands, you actually end up with fewer counts per certified course. So what happens is you end up taking the larger of the two constants. So typically, as you certify, you learn, those tricks of the trade. And so, hey, I want to calibrate beforehand when the temperature is a little cooler as the temperature goes up, because I know when I calibrate the second time, I'm going to have a smaller constant because the wheel is going to be larger. So that's just one of those things, so the rule is you certify with the larger of the two constants. In some cases, you can actually average the pre and the post constant to get the certification. So there's really a lot that goes into it. We could have a 3-hour long podcast just on certification.
Holy moly. I
had no idea it was that accurate. I had no idea.
Well, so let's talk about that accuracy, right? Because there's so many more counts. It's not just counting one revolution of the wheel. That counter will actually make multiple counts of an individual wheel turn. So depending on the calibration and the wheel size, that counter can actually get down to a granular accuracy roughly about 4 centimeters. So, when a runner comes in and says, my GPS says this, that, or the other, and you're dealing with a certified course, in reality, that counter that was on that bike is going to be a whole lot more accurate. And of course, that counter rode exactly the shortest route, all of the tangents. It didn't stop and go to the bathroom or waver going in and out of an aid station. It went exactly the shortest possible route they could run.
So it seems to me you've kind of heard that complaint, maybe once or twice before about runners saying it's off because of what their GPS said.
Whole lot. Yeah, a whole lot. Yeah, we hear it a lot.
That's funny. How many courses do you think you've certified?
More than 200.
Wow. So
Yeah, more than 200.
What kind of distances do you normally, is it all over the place or?
It's all over. Everything from, the longest one is, of course, the Tunnel Hill 100, and everything as short as, lap races. One that we had an American record set on this year was the Run for Water, which was like 818 meters per lap. So kind of that on the low end and all the way up to 100 miles and everything in between.
Wow, that's crazy. You were talking about Tunnel Hill, and we just had in episode 52, we talked to Steve Durbin and Camille Herron about her 100-mile world record at Tunnel Hill, and your name came up a whole bunch in that conversation. In fact, I think during...
My job was the easy part. They did all the hard work.
Well, they sure appreciated you, and in fact, I think in that interview, Steve even says, you got to have Brandon on. Oh, he'd be a good guest. So, part of that's how you're here. But talk a little bit, because I know you had a lot of involvement in the prepping for that world record being set. And there's, stuff that went into it before. And I believe it was only about 9 days ahead of time you were kind of given the heads up. So kind of what you had to do before. And then even once she crosses the finish line, you still had stuff that needed to be done to have it ratified. Can you kind of talk a bit about that?
Absolutely. Sure. Well, it started with timing Tunnel Hill the previous year for Steve. He was a good friend, and I know the system that he uses and extremely well, and have done some support with it. He asked us to come in time, and we timed it. And he said, "Hey, do you think this course could be certified?" And that's a really tricky question with a trail course, because not all trail courses can be certified. In fact, probably most can't. So, I took a look at the course and said, Steve, I'm confident this can be certified. It certainly meets all the standards for the type of course that could be certified that's not a road. So I went back in March and was hoping to, get in town, certify it, and leave. And I spent 2 days in the hotel room looking out at the rain, wishing it would go away because I can't certify in the rain. So prolonged the trip a couple of days, ended up getting it certified, got everything filed, and then we were good to go. And I said, okay, Steve, the next process is you need to go ahead and sanction the event. So we worked with getting the event sanctioned. And at that point, you have a bona fide competition. It's a sanctioned race on a certified course, which means it is absolutely record eligible, provided it meets all the record criteria, and it does. That doesn't mean that I really expected anyone to come and run that fast and set a record. And being the timer and the official for the event this year, I think the notice I got from Steve was a little less than that. I think it was Tuesday of the week of the race, and he called me and said, "Hey, we have someone that said they're going to set a world record on the course." And I was kind of like, okay, who is it? Because we got to know if this is a legitimate attempt or not. And I didn't honestly know who Camille was. So, he said Camille Herron, and I started doing some Google search, and I said, oh boy, she's fast.
She's legit. Yeah.
Yeah, this is obviously something that has to be taken seriously. And Steve said, oh, absolutely, for sure. So we need to start working through the process. So I talked to him and said, well, we're going to have to get some more timing gear. We're obviously going to have check method the turnarounds. That wasn't part of what we were originally talking about doing. We're going to have to change the setup a whole lot and get a lot more evidence. We're just going to have to produce a lot more data. We're going to have to get 3 stop times. We're going to have to get some additional help, order some additional equipment. So we just prepped all of that, and I prepped all the folks who were working with us and said, here's what needs to happen. And so we set about making sure we had, the 3 stopwatches for the overall male and the overall female started on time, synced with the equipment. When I went and put everything out on the course of the turnarounds, I made very, very detailed notes and measurements and took pictures of all of that so I could submit it in the paperwork afterward, exactly where the start was, photo evidence of how the start was set up, where the runners were, and the finish and the turnarounds and so on. So, and then, of course, when Camille finishes, something you don't see is, my son is sitting in the timing tent operating the RFID system, and myself and 2 other timers are off to the side, grabbing hand stopwatch times, and there's a big celebration going on, and we're in the tent, taking pictures of the stopwatches and validating the information. And then it's not over, because in order for her record to be valid, you've got to do it for the next one coming in, which is Mike Bialik. And you're trying to sync all of this in the dark when you can't see who's coming. And we managed to get it right for everyone and get everything submitted. And then after, we've got to take all that information, put it in an application, a record application. It's got all the sanction information, the course information, all the information for how we set everything up, the course certification number, the stop times, evidence of everything that's transpired. So it was a couple of days of hard work leading up to it. Of course, a lot of hard work during the event, and another, say, 2 days worth of paperwork after.
Wow. Just no idea how much went into it. And, for some of the conversations, we understood some of the stuff going into it. But, the fact that she crosses the line, sets a world record, it doesn't stop there. It's
not over yet. Yeah.
Yeah, 2 days worth of paperwork.
Exactly. Because now I've got to track down all these people and get signatures from everyone. I've got to get a signature from Steve. He's got to read paragraphs of, yes, we follow all these rules, we follow those rules, and I've got to sign as the timer. I validate these results, and each of the individual people that operated those stopwatches, we have to have signatures from those people. We've got to put all that evidence, so the photo evidence of where the turnarounds were, how they were located, all of that has to be put in a document and sent in to say, hey, this is a legitimate record, and here's everything that proves that.
That's so incredible to me, because an individual is not just going to roll up into a race and then just set a world record. Because it seems like if that person knows that they're in that sort of condition, that they're going to be able to make an attempt at that, then they're going to want to make sure that everything is taken care of on the race side, their side.
And Camille did. She did everything right. I'll tell you what, she sent all the communication to the race director. Ultimately, it's on that athlete to say that, right, and declare that. And you put that in perspective with what Camille did and what every other athlete has done in that position is they have to pull the ultimate Babe Ruth and call that shot, And I will tell you, I've never heard in my life anyone so confident as Camille. She didn't say, I'm going to try, I'm coming to run my best, I'm going to give it a good go. She said, I am going to break the world record. Straight up, with no doubt, with no hesitation. And she turned around and did it. And I was blown away. I was just like, wow. That's probably the most brazen, not arrogant, confident, thing I've witnessed. I'm going to do this, and bam, done. And not like by a couple of seconds, but by more than an hour. We're just like, wow, that just happened.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And we have to prove it.
Yeah. Now, how nerve-wracking is that? Because you know that she's done it.
Pretty nerve-wracking.
Because after that point, yeah, it's on you.
Let's put it this way. People knew. That's exactly right. Not only is it not, yes, that was rough. That was a stressful time, because even when you know you've done everything right, even when you know the course is certified, even when you know that it's right, even when you know that you have all of the timing information, and my name is all over that. And at the end of the day, if that record didn't get ratified because there was something amiss in the timing results, or there was something amiss in the measuring results, I'd be the biggest idiot of all time. I'd be the guy that denied Camille her record. So, because the other thing that people don't know is after that record is set, a verifier, another A measure, has to go out and reproduce your result and verify the measurement and say, yes, this is 100 miles. So until that's done, there's no great sleep. And I can tell you that even before that race was over on Sunday morning, while we were still sitting there timing, my phone rang, and it was the verifier. He said, "I'm going to need some information from you so I can come verify that course." I said, "Oh, absolutely. I fully understand."
Oh, I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want that person. So what? So
you do and you don't. You know, I mean, you want to be the guy that's known for doing it right, that can do it right, that does do it right. But at the same time, that comes with risk of failure, you know, because everyone can and does make mistakes. And you don't want to be the guy making the mistake on that day.
Yeah, that's a good point. And you didn't, I mean, and that's one of the reasons why, like, Camille thinks you are like the absolute best person. So, so what happens if somebody is out in a race and they happen to set, you know, a record, whether it's an American record or world record, but it's not something that they have called ahead of time. It's just something that, I hate, for lack of a better word, just kind of happens. Is there any way to still? It's going to just depend on what evidence is available. You know, what kind of record has been set. Is it an age group record? Is it an open record? Is it it just depends on a lot of stuff. And there may be enough evidence already captured between the timer, you know, and folks, and there may not be. So that really just depends. It's really a message to all of the timers and all of the certifiers out there, really to prepare for every race as if that record is going to be set, because you just don't ever know if it is. Or, you know, obviously, you know, the more notice the athlete gives, the better. But, you know, I'll give you, for example, you know, when my son and I set up to time at Run for Water, when we were asked to go in there by Greg Armstrong, and you see the list of names that are coming, and you see John Olson on there, and you see Stephen Gina Slabby on there, you know, you had better get it right. That, you know, record or not, you know, when you see those names on the roster, you know, the reason why you're there is because those people are there, and the reason, you know, what those people expect is that it's going to be done right. But it's really a message that, you know, we try and tell everyone, you know, hey, don't get lax and don't get slack, because you just don't ever know when it might bite you. So you have to treat every time you're setting up everything you're doing, do it always right.
That makes a lot of sense to me. We've got a local race here, and it's a certified 25K, which is a very odd distance. And it kind of brings in a lot of people from around the state of Missouri, because they're looking to get their names into the Missouri State Record Book.
Sure. Yeah. If it's only 25K, that's a record course. Absolutely.
Yeah, it is. And so it was, I think, 2 years ago or something like that, and I was running the race. And all of a sudden, it's in February, which in Missouri is either super windy, rainy, snowy. It could be any sort of weather. And we caught a day that was 70 degrees in February. So excellent weather, perfect weather, no wind. And then all of a sudden, there were 3 state records that were set in age on that random day at that random race. And so, and right. It is a certified course. And so it's one of those things where, and these are local runners too. And so you never know whenever something like that could happen. And they were all ratified, and they all Absolutely. Got their names in the state record books. And so it's kind of
a state record is the lowest bar, the lowest burden of proof. It gets infinitely harder from there, but there's still information that has to be provided at that level. It has to be certified, it has to be sanctioned. You have to have the time. You need to have some type of backup time to verify the primary time, but you just don't ever know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
So I'm curious too, because one of the things we talked about, and you said you're a USATF official. So what exactly does that title mean? Again, I feel like that's one of those things that we hear all the time, but we're not quite sure.
That's how you learn to do this process right. So not only am I official for LDR or running races, road races, but also for track and field, which doesn't really have a lot of bearing on road running. But as an official in the LDR world, it's your job to understand the process for what's required for a record, for what's required for course setup, what's required for photo evidence, what's required for the safety of the runner. All of those things that go into that is the responsibility of the certified official. And you become a certified official by taking a test, a written test, that shows that you understand all of those procedures, you understand the rules. So that's really what an official is. It's the official's job to officiate, to understand the rules, to do the paperwork, to make sure that all the processes are followed, that there are not rule infractions like pacing and, unfair assistance and all the other stuff that goes along with that. So my job working with a race, like working with Greg at Run for Water or Steve at Tunnel Hill, is to make sure that they understand that as well and say, hey, you know that you can't have pacing, you know that you need to follow this rule, you know that the zone for the aid station needs to be here and there needs to be no outside assistance outside of that, et cetera, and go through that and make sure they get that. And they're really good about understanding that and communicating that to the runners as well.
Okay, so prior to a race, let's say you go into a race and things aren't right. Does that director have the opportunity to do some corrective actions prior to the race to make sure that they don't get any trouble with any certification or anything?
Yeah, they certainly they have every opportunity to get it right. The information is publicly available. Most of those races are working with a timer. Most of those timers, have a pretty good idea, what is going on and how to go about that, or they know, the right people to involve. So, the one thing, everyone thinks that the official is like an iron fist, like, bam, you're disqualified. That's really not the case. Every effort is made to err on the side of the event and err on the side of the athlete, and warning them and say, hey, and I've had to do that in events before and say, hey, what you're doing is considered pacing and you're going to have to stop. And usually, they're usually like, okay, whatever. A lot of people don't really understand that, but it's something, in ultra running, I think a lot of people are drawn to the social aspect, and it's like, hey, I can have someone run with me and pace with me, and that's all well and fine. But in a sanctioned event, especially where records are being attempted, those people cannot have any of that assistance. That cannot take place. And that's something that I think people are starting to learn as there's more and more sanctioned races out there in the ultra world, but it's something people still struggle with because they're like, but my friend wants to help me run 100 miles. Yeah, but your friend can't. It's a violation of the rules,
So what are some of the big events that you've officiated?
I did the North Carolina Marathon Championship. That was probably the biggest one here in the state. It was the state marathon. And then pretty much any race I'm timing, I'm also officiating. So Run for Water, Tunnel Hill, Mike Milton and I did Pistol Ultra last year. To make me sit here and think of every single thing we've done would be difficult. I'd have to look at a calendar. But we've timed a lot of races, especially over the years, but over the last couple of years as well.
So I bet you, from officiating and kind of all the stuff you've been around, you've got to at least have like a really good, funny or great story out of some of those. That you're allowed to share.
Man, that's a tough one right off the top of my head. That's a question I wish I had ahead of time so I could think about it. Not really that I can think of, to be honest with you.
Like no crazy,
not really. It would be great if I had a really funny story or there was something really exciting. But honestly, a lot of times we're just sitting in the background. You go to a race and you remember the race director and you're like, man, that Steve Durbin was the greatest guy in the world. But you don't. There's the timer sitting in the tent. It's like, who's the idiot in the tent? It's really kind of an unexciting job, really. You're absolutely critical to the event. But here's the thing. When everything goes well, no one thinks about that guy. And that's exactly the way you want it as a timer. You want things unexciting. My buddy and business partner, Mike Melton, says, people make fun of him sleeping in the tent. And he says, this is what you want your timing guy doing. If he's over here spazzing and running around and freaking out and turning knobs and pulling his hair out, something is wrong. And that's not the guy you want to see in the timing tent.
Yeah, that's bad. Well, I'll tell you, any race I go to now, I will have a much, much greater appreciation for the guy in the timing tent. That's for sure.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Appreciate that.
One quick question. You were talking about ultras earlier, and a lot of those are run on trails. And then you said that there are some trails that can be certified and some trails that can't. What's kind of the difference between one that can be and one that can't be?
Sure. Well, as a general rule, what we say is a cross-country course can't be certified. And what we mean by that is it's over the river and through the woods and by grandma's house and around the third tree and over by the post and, by the cat litter box over there and around and back. And the problem with that is we can't document a map and produce a repeatable course under those circumstances. So in a trail course, first off, I've got to be able to ride it on my bike, and a lot of trail is not conducive to doing that. So first off, we have the challenge just of the terrain and of the bike, and that we can't get a repeatable ride. Then you're going to have the challenge that a runner could cut the course, because if you were doing some clover leaf pattern, someone can look through the trees and say, look, I can go 90 degrees right over there, and I can be, ahead of everyone. And so it's really difficult to prevent that course cutting and make sure that everyone runs the same course. And then there's the documentation piece. That means year after year after year after I make this certificate, someone has to be able to follow the certified map and ensure that that course is set up exactly that way in a repeatable fashion again. So a lot of the challenges with trail courses make that, in many times impossible to do. So where we have this, there was this grand debate after Tunnel Hill. Why did this idiot Brandon Wilson certify Tunnel Hill with a road running certification when it's a trail? And there was a lot of people that just couldn't understand that. And even people within USA Track and Field wanted to know, why did you do this? And I said, well, because it meets all of the burdens. Someone cannot cut this course. If they get off of this trail, they're basically, they're not on course. And you'd have to see Tunnel Hill to understand, when you're off to the side and you're not on the trail, you're not going anywhere fast. You're either stuck in swamp or you fell down, the side of a small hill, the point is you need to be on the surface to run it. The surface is crushed. It's repeatable, crushed limestone. It basically runs like road. In some places it has some leaf cover. So we can document where those turnarounds are. For example, south turnaround is at a Tunnel Hill State Trail sign. That's a location that's not going to change, and we can set that turnaround up over and over and over again. So when we ride that course, we're able to reproduce those counts, and we meet all the burden. You don't have to worry about someone cutting the course. It's repeatable. The turnarounds are in the right place. So that's the type of course that can be certified. Whereas, the previous trail course I described, is something that you can't certify.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't even think about the turnaround point that, out there, that it has to be like a specific thing that's not going to change. Like you said, you can't, have the cat litter box.
Right, absolutely. It has to be something fixed that we can document, that we can set up and reproduce exactly that one turnaround spot over and over and over again. And so, at Tunnel Hill, it worked out very well that we had that. And the north turnaround was a little trickier, so what we did is we measured from a milepost, and it was like 2,087 feet, north of milepost whatever. And of course that milepost isn't going to move. And something else that we did to help with that is we took a big iron surveyor's post and we stuck it in the ground, at the turnaround, and documented where that was. And we also documented where that was in relation to the milepost in case that disappeared, so that we could always go back and reproduce exactly that spot.
Seriously, have a whole new appreciation when I'm out on that course now.
It's not a random spot. It is exactly specific. And I was the one responsible for going out there and saying, yes, this is that spot. I certified this course, and this is exactly and precisely where this turnaround goes. And I'm going to take pictures to prove that. So when someone comes out and verifies it, they can find exactly that spot as well. And they were able to do that.
And that's got to be something that's frustrating too, because I imagine it has to have happened where you've gone out, certified a course, and gone through all that. And then when the race director actually runs it, there's some kind of error and it ends up either running short or long.
Sure. That's kind of the news of the day. And I'll be the first to say there's two types of errors that can be made. One of, a course can be long or short because the measurer or the certifier actually made an error. And in the plus 200 courses I've done, I've had one of those that happened where there was an error made. And that one was on me. And that happens much, much more rarely than the former, which is the course is documented, the turnaround is given, there's a point where it should be exactly here, and for whatever reason, there's confusion and the race doesn't put it in that spot. And I've also been involved in a couple of those as well. And so, in either case, you end up with a course that's not right, and it's very frustrating for everyone involved, and even more so frustrating for the runners.
Oh, so did they come back, and even though when it's like the race director's fault or somebody out on the course, did they try and come back on you?
No, I've never had that happen. Usually
That's
when
great.
that happens, the first thing I do is reach out to the race director and say, hey, what happened? Let's talk about this a little bit. And that happened with the first year with Chattanooga Marathon. And I contacted the race director, and he's like, hey, man, it's not your fault. It was on us. The map clearly says where it should have been. And we were a block off, and that's on us. And and that's not for my benefit of saying, hey, you did something wrong. And, I'm here. I want you to hear you say it wasn't me. That's more of an educational thing for me saying, and I asked him, is there anything I could have done, differently or better that would have helped? And he was like, no, it's 100% on us. So, that call has to be made, hey, what could I have done? And again, these people, when we come in and measure with the race, we're their partner. It's within our best interest and their best interest for this thing to go well. So when it doesn't go well, everyone loses. I mean, everybody involved.
Right. Going back to timing for a moment, and I believe it was Steve who mentioned this, and he thinks you just do such a fabulous job. And he says one of the things that kind of really sets you apart from some of the other timers is that you have, this great IT background, and you're a real IT guru, which means you kind of really understand all aspects of timing and can really troubleshoot on the fly if you need to. Just curious, how did you get into IT?
In the Marines. I went in the Marine Corps on an open contract. I wanted to get out of where I lived. I didn't care where I went or what I did. I just wanted to get gone. And I went in the Marine Corps and took the ASVAB test and went through the first, the portion of the School of Infantry they call, Marine Combat Training. And you wait to find out, whether you're going to do more infantry training or go elsewhere. And I got orders to report to the Computer Sciences School in Quantico, Virginia. And I said, you got the wrong guy. I didn't even take typing in high school. And
oh my gosh.
Nope, this is you. You're the right guy. Our equivalency test says you have a general technical of 128 out of 130, and this is what you're going to be doing. So good luck. And so I was trained by the Marine Corps to do computers, and I left the Marine Corps, and that's really pretty much all I've ever done since 1993. I've worked in IT either for the government or elsewhere.
Wow.
So in the Corps, what did you do with IT?
My job was to build networks. So for people that are in the IT world, they'll appreciate we had, a Banyan Vines network that was all meshed over old synchronous modems. We had these super fast 64K direct links between our servers. And the Marine Corps, said that's just not going to cut it. So we went out and we built a fiber optic network. And so we literally, the Marines, our job was to go out and pull the fiber, splice the fiber, connect it to the servers, run the token ring cable inside of the buildings, provision the networks, provision the routers, all from scratch. So that's what I spent 4 years doing, was going around and building, LAN networks and WAN networks. And so when it was time to get out, there was a lot more money in the IT field doing that after we were trained to do it. And as painful as it was to leave the Marine Corps, I was getting married and had a family, so I moved on and basically moved out into the civilian world doing the same thing.
That is so cool to have absolutely no background in that and to be able to go and jump in and do all that cool stuff. That is so cool.
I'll tell you, I remember studying for a test when I was a private in the barracks. Well, it was like the first test we're going to have, and I'm cramming, trying to figure out what all this stuff means. And I remember reading, what is the definition of a microprocessor, probably 50 times. And I was like, this is garbage. It doesn't make any sense. What does that mean? And I was fortunate that I guess it eventually made sense. But I was like, they've got the wrong guy. Something's wrong with that test. And it doesn't mean anything. So back to your question, in the case of timing in the system that I use, the Race Result 11 software, it just made sense. It's built on a relational database. It uses functions that you can type in. You can change anything in there that you want to see. You can change the format of the report. You can change everything in the cells and the column data. You can change how it scores. You can change how it ranks. You can change the background color of anything. You can write a check that says if and I do this a lot, if they finished and they only have a gun time and they don't have a chip time, highlight them yellow, flag them for review. So I was fortunate when I stumbled across that software, it just clicked and it made sense. And for a lot of people, it doesn't click and make sense intuitively. Even brilliant timers come across it and they're, first they struggle and they have a hard time with that. And I didn't. It came very naturally, kind of like a fish in water. And I've been very fortunate to help people like Steve and Mike and other people that are around me, learn the software and use it. And then they're like, man, this is the most powerful stuff I've ever used. I said, absolutely. Certainly is.
That is unbelievable. That's so cool. So I'm just curious. So you go from the Marines into family life and all of that. How did you get into racing and timing and all of that?
That's a great question.
Yeah, you keep going like these big leaps.
Yeah, no, I started, I was, and I'm a fat guy now, but I was really fat guy then. I was over 300 pounds and I needed to lose some weight. And my daughter had given me some inspiration to lose some weight back in 2007. And so I started trying to lose weight. I was swimming every day for an hour a day and losing weight. And I kept hearing people in the locker room talk about this triathlon they did or whatever. And I was like, man, I could do that. So I started doing triathlons, and a year later I did an Ironman triathlon, and I got to a point I was just bored with triathlon, and one of my buddies approached me. Honestly, I hadn't even really heard of ultra at this point. What I'm going to say probably sounds crazy, but it's true. He said, hey, there's this 100-mile race. We're going to do a relay. Will you run a leg of the relay for us? And I was like, yeah, let me look into it. And I started looking into it, and it said that you could do 100 miles solo. And I was like, ooh, that sounds cool. I wonder if I could do that. And I had just come off of, an Ironman. I hadn't really done, leading up to that, I had done a lot of training, but for the last month and a half or so after it, I had really just not done much. And so I called my buddy back and I said, I'll tell you what, I'll help you field a team, but I'm going to run it solo. And he said, you've lost your freaking mind. And I was like, maybe, but I'm going to try it anyway. So I went out and ran it and finished in 23 hours and 44 minutes.
Shut up. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I know.
It's not bad at all.
It's not. And I was hooked on the crowd. I was hooked on the people. And so I started traveling around doing ultras. And, the thing that really I thought was so neat is it'd be like, hey, Tom, how's the kids? And I was like, these people, are they all family? And everyone was joking, be like, well, of course we are. We're all ultra runners. And, but that aspect was something that I found in ultra that I didn't find in triathlon that I really liked. And they welcomed my family. They got to know the kids, when these people that my children are timing now, timing for Steve and stuff. When these people met my children, they were tiny. When I post pictures on Facebook, people are like, no way, that was Caleb, 6 years ago, 5 years ago. I'm like, yeah, and now, they grew up, and they know these people and the people they're around know them. And so that probably was the biggest draw, was the family aspect. And the more I got involved in it, the more I'd look at, just like when I did that first triathlon, I'd look at people putting on these races and I'd say, well, I could do that. And someone measuring a course. Well, I can do that. Well, someone timing a race. Well, I can do that. Why should I pay someone to do that when I can do it myself? So that was kind of how it all started.
Okay. So you saying do it yourself. And I see that, you're a race director and you also founded some pretty crazy races. And then one of them just recently finished up, and that's the Tar Heel Ultra. Can you tell us about that race, right, or any of the other races, or what got you into directing races?
I don't know. It's strange. I just felt like it was something I really wanted to do. And I started off, I started with Graveyard 100 was the first one that I wanted to do. And that was kind of a big goal, big vision. And there were a bunch of other races we did. At the time we were putting on races, there was really nothing else around us. So we were doing Nusiak Trail Running, Croatan 24 Hour, and Kinston 250K, and Graveyard 100, Matamesquite Death March. The list goes on and on. All in total, I probably directed about 65 races in 5 years.
Oh my gosh.
And they were predominantly races that I founded, ideas that I had. Tar Heel really didn't start off as a race. Tar Heel was something I wanted to do myself. It was my own solo journey. I wanted to, Eastern North Carolina was an adopted home, and I wanted to run all of the coastal roads from the Virginia state line to the South Carolina state line. I ended up getting a stress fracture at an event with Steve Durbin, no less, at the Bitter End 100. And some people had said, hey, what about that Tar Heel thing you were going to do? And so I turned it into an event for a few of my friends. And that's kind of how it started. It really didn't start off as I'm going to create this great multi-day race. It was, I want to create something cool for myself to do. And then it became something cool that my friends wanted to do. And then my friends were all like, you're an idiot. You gave us a piece of asphalt for doing this. And that became kind of a coveted thing, and other people wanted to start doing it. And Tar Heel, more than anything, it's probably a life changer for people that do it. They don't come out of that the same person they went into it. Well, maybe John Price does, but
and there's
other people don't.
There's a lot of people who don't know what Tar Heel. Can you explain what the race is for those who don't know?
It started off as a 367-mile run where we would actually take you and drive you up the last section of the North Carolina coast. It's about 11 miles of sand. And we'd start you right there at the fence that runs from land into the water at the Virginia state line. And you would run, crawl, travel by foot, whatever means you could, using a defined route of coastal roads all the way through the coast of North Carolina down to Calabash, North Carolina, where the South Carolina state line is. And you have 8.5 days to do it that first year. And that first year, no one knew, I told them you weren't going to get anything but a beer when you finish. And of course, we started giving them the piece of asphalt, kind of cruel irony. You ran over this asphalt. So this is a North Carolina piece of asphalt for you here with the numbers painted on it for the number of miles you ran. And then a couple years in, my family went through some tough times, and my wife and I split up, and I ended up with the kids full time. And so raising kids full time was the full time job. And so Henry Lupton, who is currently organizing Tar Heel Ultra, came in and he said, this is a special event to me personally, having done it, and I don't want it to go away, because you have competing priorities. Can I carry it forward? And so that's what he's done for the last 2 years. So it still goes on. I still go out and help out a little bit. I still go to the dinner beforehand and help Henry and advise Henry as well. And it's great to see that it's continuing.
That's really cool. One of the races that I definitely want to talk about, because I'm somewhat fascinated with it. And this is the one Durbin's trying to tell me, oh yeah, you need to come do this with me. And that's the race of equals, which it intrigues me and scares me. And it's, if you can describe what it is, and then please go over what the rules were for this year.
I was asking Crystal about this earlier, and she's like, "No, you just need to listen about it." So I'm very curious to hear what it is.
Race of Equals is kind of all of my bad ideas ever all put together. And when I say bad ideas, I was kind of a very sadistic race director, and I don't know how to describe that. I guess the runners themselves would have to explain that to you, but I would mercilessly pun unintentionally. I wasn't a Jason Green or, Steve Durbin type race director where I'd be like, hey, everyone's going to succeed and we're all for you and we're all great people. I was more of I'm going to punish you and you're not going to leave here until you've been thoroughly punished type of person. And that was just my nature. It was my way. And it attracted like people. I don't know how else to say that. When I started getting into race directing, Blake Norwood said, surround yourself with people you want to hang out with, and they're going to be the people that come to your races. So I guess I'm a sadist, and all the people that came are masochists, and it worked well. Race of Equals was I wasn't putting on any races, and the kids and I were kind of sitting around joking and about different things that we thought would be cool. And you keep seeing these Facebook posts and posts everywhere over and over again. What's the best pack? What's the best shoes? What's the best this? What's the best hydration bladder? And it's like, the answer gets so mundane and stupid and boring. It's like, whatever is right for you is the right thing. There's no best anything. I saw people run incredible mileage in ridiculous shoes that they shouldn't have been doing any running in. It's the best shoe for them. So I came up with an idea and said, what if everything was equal? What if everyone had the same gear list, the same socks, the same shoes, the same clothes, the same everything, the same not knowing, telling them that I can't tell you what the distance is going to be. I can't tell you where you're going to start or where you're going to finish. You just have to show up and find out. But show up with this gear list. Well, that doesn't exactly attract the type of person that's interested in setting a 100-mile PR. And it's intentional. And so, to make that even more interesting, it's invite only. You're not even going to know anything about the race unless you get invited, because it's just going to happen. It's going to go bump in the night. You're not even going to know what happens. And to make it even more complex, we change the venue and we change everything every year. So nothing ever stays the same. So what Steve went through is they had to see if I can remember everything right, because I don't write this stuff down. So we had them get a kitty size pink Hello Kitty backpack, a pair of Walmart shoes. They had to be less than $20, a pair of diabetic compression socks, a pair of cheap running shorts from Walmart. We had them get a white cotton tank top from Karen Jackson from her hardware store. In the pack, they had, they could have a can of Spam, some gels, pack of crackers, $20. And like the old hot water bottle your grandma used to put on her back when her back was sore.
Yep.
Yeah.
Those little pink water bottles.
Yep.
That's what I had them use for their water bottle. So that was their hydration bladder.
Those smell nasty too.
Oh yeah, it was everything bad I could think of. Absolutely, I wanted them to be like, "There's no way, screw that, I'm not coming." And so like 11 people still showed anyway. But so they showed up, and I wrote a combination lock on their arm and pen, and I handcuffed them, and I blindfolded them, and I stuck them in a van, and I drove them around for a while in circles to kind of disorient them a little bit. And I drove them about 66 miles from their vehicle. And I gave them no map, and I gave them a GPS coordinate and said, this is the finish. 6 miles north of here on a tree is a chain that has a lock on it. Go get your lock and then make your way to the finish. And you're going to get no other aid other than what you have in your pack or what you can buy with your $20. Bye. And I drove off, and they were literally in the middle of nowhere. And that was Race of Equals this year, and 3 people finished, including, one of those was Steve Durbin, a guy that's very near and dear to my heart that lives just up the road named Jeff Bell, who goes by Jeff Spicoli online, and Tasha Holland from West Virginia. And all of the other people either quit or were disqualified because they used private roads, which was not allowed this year under the rules. And so the rule of equals is when someone finishes, everyone else is disqualified. So even though Steve finished, he still ended up getting a congratulations, you've been disqualified because you didn't win notification.
How far did they end up going? How far did they end up going?
Probably close to 90 miles all in total in a pair of $20 Walmart shoes. Their feet were absolutely horrendous. They were in terrible shape. So, and I did break my word, and I did help them. I will say that I did take Steve and Jeff a bottle of water when they were about 3 miles from the finish.
That is it's crazy. You know what that kind of reminds me of too, Andy? Do you remember when you and Steven had the
cheap shoe challenge that we did?
Yes, the cheap shoes challenge. That would have been perfect.
Okay. Yeah. So, Brandon, Steven and I, what we did was we ordered cheap overseas Chinese shoes that we had to spend less than $20. That same premise there, and we were going to try them and see if they were just as good as your expensive running store shoes. And so
they're not.
They were terrible. I only ran in mine once because they didn't even come the right size. I mean, I had to stick my feet into them, and they were just like they were just as tight as could be. And so I thought I'm going to at least put one run into them because I've got to at least, go through with the challenge. But yeah, they are terrible shoes.
Well, I promised them after I knew they'd be hard on the feet. I intended for them to be hard on their feet. I intended for them to get some foot swelling and some pain and maybe some blisters. What I saw when I saw the feet, I felt bad. I was like, wow, that was not the expected result. That's much worse than the expected result. So, much worse. I mean, yeah, I wanted them to suffer, but what they went through was a little beyond what I had calculated. So I told them this year for equals, I'd let them pick their own footwear. So I'd be a little more lenient on the footwear aspect of it, because I don't want them to, get some crazy foot injury and some infection in a blister or something. And, I'd feel terrible. They're my friends. But at the same time, I still want them, I want their feet to hurt. So this year I'm just going to pick some more challenging terrain that'll punish them a little better.
Yeah, that's so nice of you. I'll tell you, one of my favorite things is
they love it, though.
Yeah, when we were actually setting up to record, and we were recording a podcast, and it was with Durbin, Laz, and then Naresh had called in later. But so Durbin had gone out to Laz's house, and so they were out for one of their walks, and he was testing his gear, and he actually sent me a selfie of him and Laz out walking, and he was testing out his pink Hello Kitty backpack. So that cracked me up while he was out there. Oh,
they couldn't put much in it. There was not a lot of room in those packs, and that was intentional. I didn't want them, like I said, it was to try and equal that field, and so one guy looks at the other guy and it's like, hey, my pink Hello Kitty backpack is chafing me. Well, suck it up, buddy, because so is mine, right? I mean, that was the premise, is there's no whining to your buddy, because you're going through exactly the same thing right down to the gear and the $20.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, right. I decided we'd do it again. So this year, we're going to take it to the mountains instead of doing it in Eastern North Carolina. So some of the same fun, some different fun. Probably some locks will still be involved, and maybe some other stuff too.
I don't know if there's banjos.
Carry ammo cans. Do you know? We had a race called Death March. I had them carry a 50 caliber ammo can around a lake that was 66 miles. And I put 100 marbles in their can, so the whole time it would shake like a shaker. So yeah, that was a lot of fun too.
Oh,
So I get a lot of grief about being the ammo can race director, but
yeah, I think Steve had mentioned that at some point too. Yeah, people need more friends like you.
He did that too.
Yeah,
he did that too. So he complains, but he still comes back.
Yeah, so not sure what that says about him. Well, also, so before we go, do you have, because, Durbin's told us some stories about you and stuff. This is your chance. Do you have a good Steve Durbin story to share?
Oh, yeah. Man, when Hoka's very first came out and I saw him at Bloody 11, he looked like he was walking on the moon. I wish I had video of him walking from the motel over to the start. I mean, he looked like he was drunk. I thought he was out drinking all night, and he was just all over the place. And I was like, man, what is wrong with this guy? Maybe he has a head injury. And and it was Steve, and he was like, it's these damn shoes, man. I'm having the hardest time navigating in these. They're the latest and greatest. And of course, they've come a long way since then. And I'm not even saying there's anything wrong with Hoka's then. It might have just been Steve, but he ended up finishing that whole thing. I think he almost got arrested before it was all over by trying to go into a fast food joint before they were open, and the people were scared and called the police. But that was a grand journey, and it started with Steve just hobbling all over. I mean, walking on the moon would have been a polite vision from what Steve was doing. It was amazing.
So I think that's going to be my favorite quote now. Who's that guy with the head injury?
Oh, yeah, man. That was crazy. But I'll tell you what, you're not going to find too many people with more perseverance than Steve. I mean, when the guy couldn't run, he walks, and he walks some incredible distances on some incredibly tough terrain, and he just doesn't quit. He's like the damn Energizer Bunny. And at the end of the day, we can talk a lot about Camille's record, and it's amazing to run that fast. It's absolutely amazing. it's also amazing to see those people that get out there, at races where all they can do is walk, and they're doing their best to walk, and they're walking it in and walking it over 30 hours, and they are coming in under some tough circumstances, suffering dearly, and still smiling. And Steve's one of those guys that just he's always smiling even when he's hurting, and so I have a lot of respect for Steve.
Yeah, I do too. He's an amazing guy. I think one of the things I really respect about him too is the fact that he used to be, really fast. And
that's right. Yeah, he was.
And I think that's really hard to go from, have the back problems and stuff and not be able to run and,
Sure.
not compare yourself and still go out and bust it the way that he does. I think it takes a very special person to do that. So, as much as we give Durbin a hard time, he's a great person. So
absolutely, I agree.
Did you have anything else, Andy?
No, I think that's great. I sure appreciate talking to you, and I appreciate how the difficult races that you're putting together that really test people. Which
it's off the beaten path. It's not for everyone, and it's not designed to be for everyone. And it's probably going to be the only race I ever put on ever again will be equals. It allows me to be a little more relaxed. I spend so much time stressing over the timing and the measuring and everything. It's nice to just sit back and have a race where all those rules are broken and there is no certified distance, and there are only really terrible bad rules, and there are no times kept, and it's just a suck fest. And so that's a nice break for me.
Yeah, those are the races of legends.
I love it.
We'll see. I doubt it'll be legendary, but it'll always be fun for me.
Well, yeah, I'm sure that memory will live on for a very long time for those people, and it's very legendary for them.
Sure.
Well, thank you so much for coming on tonight. Thank you also for your service. Appreciate that as well. And so before we go, we just want to quickly give a shout out to the Ozark Mountain Daredevils for the use of their music in our show. If you want to learn more about us, find show notes, those types of things, you can visit us at heartlandrunning.com. You can also be sure to join our Facebook group. We also have a Strava group out there that you can join as well. If you want, you can leave us a message or send us a text. We always like receiving those. The number for that is 513-486-4636. And of course, as always, if you like the show, be sure to share it with a friend. So until next week, I'm Crystal.
I'm Andy.
And we'll see you later.